to Bring the World Home, a production of the Returned Peace Corps Volunteers of Hawaii. My name is Doug Long. I served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Swaziland, Southern Africa from 1991 to 1993, and I'll be your host for today's program. In this program, we'll be sharing with you one Peace Corps volunteer's experiences from abroad. Hopefully our message of friendship and family with people of all countries and cultures is exhibited in each of our shows. With us today is Deborah Ball. She served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Niger, West Africa from 1992 to 1994. Welcome, Deborah.
Hey, Doug.
How are you today?
Doing well, thank you.
So you served in Niger, West Africa?
They actually pronounce it Niger because it's a francophone country, and it's just above Nigeria. People also confuse it with Nigeria. It's sub-Saharan West Africa, so it's all desert. In fact, a lot of the Sahara Desert is there. And it's all a landlocked country, so it's surrounded by Chad and Algeria.
Okay, all right. Did you have any idea where Niger was before you got your assignment as a Peace Corps volunteer?
Definitely did not have any idea.
So the first thing you had to do was race to the map to find out where they were sending you?
Looked at the map, I realized it was landlocked, Northern Africa, it was Muslim. The people there didn't speak any English, and I realized it was going to be a completely different reality.
Did you have any preconceptions when you signed up for Peace Corps of like what your ideal place was that you wanted to go to?
I was ready to go to Fiji. I had visited Peace Corps volunteers in Fiji. I had an idea of the accommodations they had there and the beautiful beaches and the warm people, and that's where I wanted to go.
All right. As an afterthought now, though, you've served in Niger, West Africa. Are you happy that that's where you ended up in?
I think I probably would have enjoyed anywhere I went, and I'm very grateful that I went to West Africa, because I certainly would not have traveled there just on my own, and it's such a completely different kind of world and experience, and it's obviously very different when you're living and working with the people. So I'm very grateful that that's where I ended up.
Well, I also served in Swaziland, as you know, but I was in Southern Africa. And Africa was not on the top of my list of places to go. It was, when you sign up, you put your three choices. Africa was my third. But as an afterthought, I mean, it worked out really good for me because it put me in contact with a culture that I didn't have any experience with at all. So it was probably the most rewarding and most educational experience that I could have had.
It took me a long time to adjust, Doug. When I first got there, I really had the impression that I was going to be helping all these people and contributing so much. And when I arrived and realized you had to learn how to use this money, CFA, which is a West African franc, and I had to learn how to speak the local languages, and the national language was French, but the local language were different dialects. And even the lifestyle, like for example, in order to just make a meal, you had to put all the food in iodine to get rid of the different possible bugs and things that you might get sick from. And the whole process of living, even very basic things like drinking water or eating food, took so much time. So I felt like a baby, having to learn how to, walk basically again before I could possibly contribute anything.
They give you a little bit of time to do that when you get in country. You had 3 months of training, and it just brushes the surface, I know, and then a lot of the training continues after you're actually doing your job within country.
I think I was really blown away during the first 3 months of training. They were really very helpful, but it was like being in the middle of National Geographic or something, with camels going by and the Muslim prayer call 4 times a day, just a completely different experience. And I was learning culture and language and some of the traditional herbal medicines and a whole gamut of different things.
I wanted to find out a couple things. What were your living conditions like, and also, what type of work were you doing?
I was living in what was like an adobe hut, and it was very hot. It had a tin roof, and it was the desert, so it was extremely hot during the day, and it would become sort of like an oven. So I couldn't sleep in there. I'd sleep outside under a sort of thatched roof with a mosquito net, because we had a lot of malaria in West Africa. And I didn't have running water or electricity. I had a latrine hole in the backyard where I would go to the bathroom, and bucket shower. So we said we'd take showers, but it was a bucket. And I worked in the local health clinic. I was working with malnourished women who were pregnant and also malnourished children. And that was a real shock for me because I had such an idealistic spirit about how much I was going to contribute. And then I very directly and immediately was faced with all of these situations that I realized I didn't have the facilities or the even the medical necessities that would have been needed to do the kind of assistance that was really needed there. So it was a slow process of learning what I could contribute and also trying to just work with the people. They were so resilient to the difficulties that they would face, either through famine when the rains wouldn't come, or through sicknesses when they would get malaria, or when their children would die. And so it was a real wake-up call for me.
So you're working in the clinic, and you mentioned you lived in an adobe hut with a tin roof. Was this within a family compound, or was this just a house off by itself?
It was in the middle of the village, so they're all connected with walls to other people in the village. It was sort of like a catacomb kind of thing. And I had neighbors I was very good friends with, but it was its own thing. It was actually set up for the Peace Corps volunteer, and whoever worked sort of as a nurse or something like that.
So you didn't live with another family. You had a host family, but this had been a family that maybe you made contact with during your training portion of your
we had a live-in. During the training we had live-in, and we were sent out to live with a family. That was, I think, for a week or 5 days or so. And that was a good introduction to what it would be like to live in the village, and also trying to learn some more of the local language to communicate with people and to see the way they're living. And when I went out, I was very much on my own, but I had so many friendships, and especially with my neighbors. I would eat dinner at their house a lot, and they would come over and help me, do different kind of cooking and stuff. So it was very much a family community feeling.
Did you have good access to food? What types did you have access to vegetables? Did you have access to meat?
Well, one of the things I had to adjust to, Doug, was actually functioning on with a little bit less energy, because the weather there is very extreme, and it takes a long time to adjust to that. And I don't think we ever completely do, as Westerners, adjust to it. And also the food availability is scarce. I had better access because, obviously I could get some canned foods in the city, and I had better access to foods, but still it was very limited. The staple diet there is millet, which is what we feed our cattle in the States, and they'll have that 2 or 3 times a day. Sometimes if they're lucky, they'll have it with milk or something. But they didn't eat a lot of vegetables. They would have some cassava, and occasionally like tomatoes and some other things, but it was really very limited. On the holidays, they might kill a goat and have some goat meat, but again, that was a part of the whole issue of malnutrition, is that people didn't have enough variety in their food.
How was did you cook? You cooked your own meals then? So you had a little bit more varied diet. Were you able to get vegetables, or?
I did. I think I actually became quite a minimalist in terms of my own eating, and I probably wasn't really having a healthy diet myself. But I did a combination. I ate with my neighbors. Sometimes I would eat. There was where you could get street food just off the street. They would cook up different things, and a lot of times I would just prepare something myself. But it was pretty simple.
Okay. Maybe tell me a little bit more about your working conditions at the clinic that you worked at. Maybe even describe the building. Was it just a one-room clinic? Were there other people working with you?
Yeah, I worked with several different people that had been trained as professional nurses, and it was, I think, also very challenging for them because they had more education to then have to go back to a rural village and again be very limited in terms of the medicine and stuff they had access to. Some of the realities of working there were just dealing with the environment. Like, we would get sandstorms sometimes, so we'd have all these women coming with their children to be weighed and to be monitored in terms of the growth of the child, and then we would have a sandstorm sweep through where you basically just need to cover your face and find some shelter so that you don't have all this stuff blowing in your face, and so a lot of times you know, even just getting through the day, it was a matter of coping with the environment and the limited supply of things. So, for example, if there was a woman who was having difficulty with childbirth, we really didn't have a lot of different things machines or anything like that we could offer to help her through labor. And so there would be a lot of last-minute rushes to get her into the capital, which was, you know, very far away from where we lived. But there was also just a real beauty in the community among the women when they would come in. You know, it was really like a social time for them, so they get very dressed up to take their child into the clinic because they could socialize with the other women and find out what was happening in other villages. And you know, they were always interested in talking to me and what my life was like. So it was also a very kind of light social time too.
Yeah. Well, I think most countries are much slower paced than we're used to as Americans. So I mean, one of the first lessons you learn is slow down, and that there's you know, a lot more going on in life than just you know, going to work from 9 to 5 every day. So I think a lot of those experiences and are heightened when you go into a living, you know, environment like this. What was your experiences in relationship to being a woman in a Muslim country?
That was a real challenge. I think at first I wasn't sure how to deal with it because I wasn't considered a local woman. You know, they didn't treat me like a local woman, and yet I also wasn't a man, so they weren't really sure how to treat me, and I wasn't really clear about how I should be acting. But it was very beautiful once I learned more of the language and I learned how to joke with them. They would tease me and joke me to sort of see how far they could push me. And they would say, oh, so they had given me a Muslim name, Zaratu. And they'd say, oh, Zaratu, I want to marry you, you know. And so I would joke back with the Muslim culture and say, well, I'm going to have 3 husbands. You know, one who's going to cook for me, one who's going to entertain me, one who's going to take care of the kids. And they loved it because it was so completely, you know, odd to hear that kind of response, let alone to have a woman saying that to them. And so I think we at first it was very challenging, but after a while I really learned how to have a rapport that was kind of humorous. Mm-hmm. So.
All right. You mentioned to me earlier that you you brought some jewelry and some other things back, you know, from country. Is this, especially talking about the jewelry first, is this typical of what the Niger women will wear, or, you know, is the jewelry you have, is it out of the reach of the common, you know, Niger woman, or that?
This is actually very common. That jewelry would be passed down, so it's something that would be held in the family, and maybe like one bracelet would be given from the mom to the daughter or whatever. So they would obviously have to be very skillful in terms of being able to buy it and have the resources for it. But it's very common, and this is all hand done. They would
maybe you can hold your hand up here where they can get a shot of it there.
They would just sometimes pour this, the way that they would actually craft it is pour the silver in the sand, and then as it started to cool, they would start to carve in it. And in fact, like for example, this ring has the Muslim prayer, and it's basically a blessing for, you know, for peace and for health and life and well-being. And each of them, it's amazing how intricate they are in terms of their carving with very rudimentary kind of tools. And the more women would really go to a lot of ends and means to get a lot of this, and usually their arms would be full of different kinds of jewelry and rings and earrings and things and necklaces.
Well, it sounds very Hawaiian to me, with the Hawaiian jewelry here.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. This necklace actually, it's a cross, and each of the cities in Niger used to be on the trade route between the Mediterranean and Ghana, the Gold Coast. And when they would come up through Niger to go to the northern countries in the Mediterranean, each of the cities had a cross. So this is one of the crosses for a city symbol. And some more very beautiful, intricate stuff.
You have some interesting earrings.
Yeah, this is also considered a cross. It doesn't look like one in terms of our Western idea of a cross, but this is another symbol of Agadez, the city there.
Okay, all right. And you have some bags that you brought back also, and
Yeah, this is camel leather, and as you can see, it's all hand done, and it's very intricate. They'll spend hours and hours doing these patterns, and a lot of them they'll just sort of make up as they go along. So it's incredible, the craftsmanship they do. Again, this is the cross, another cross from a city. This is a large bag that they might carry, you know, so for example, the nomads of Niger might carry all of their goods in one bag like this as they travel. This is a pillow that, again, is, you know, a lot of these things they would just sort of design as they did it, but real craftsmanship. And the camel leather is actually very strong.
Is art a big part of the culture? Or is this the exception that you know, you find these items that are?
I think that because the countryside seems very barren to us, it's mostly desert, and I think that one of the things that people do is really have expression through art, either, you know, through things like this. For example, this was done by a friend of mine by hand, or they'll have other forms of art like dancing and drumming. And they'll develop it to just incredible levels, and even the little girls will be excellent dancers. And I think that's really a form of, you know, freedom and expression for them in their daily lives, which can be very challenging, especially for the women who are pounding and gathering wood, taking care of many children. It's really a source of joy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how would you compare it to, say, Hawaii? You know, people that are of Hawaiian ancestry seem to. The song and the dance seem to be a big part of their family life as a whole. Is that similar to there?
Very much so. I think so much of the community revolves around not only immediate family but extended family, very much like Hawaii. And it also had very much the system of, you know, sort of aunties and uncles taking care of children and inviting each other to baptisms and different ceremonies. Marriages, weddings, you know, so it was really a very community-centered, definitely.
Okay. How is you spoke of families? You know, how do you compare the family closeness, you know, immediate family, and then, you know, say, you know, aunts, uncles, and stuff like that in relationship to what we find typical in America?
It's just a completely different system, Doug. Like, for example, even as a foreigner there, they really made an effort to include me. And for example, in the community, there might be people that are in the Western society would be considered outcasts, you know, crazy people or something. And there, the local community would make such an effort to always make sure that they were fed. And if somebody came by that they didn't know, somebody was passing through, they would feed them and house them. For example, one time I did a lot of work out in the bush, so I would, you know, maybe walk for like 4 or 5 hours, and sometimes I would get caught in either sandstorms or really torrential downpours during the rainy season. And, you know, I would just, you know, if there was a hut nearby, I would go over and they would invite me in. They would, you know, immediately offer me some kind of food or drink or try to make me comfortable. And the welcome is so sincere and so complete. And I think they have a better understanding of their interrelatedness in community. For example, community decision making. You know, it wasn't, you know, just the chief makes the decision. It was, you know, that everybody really had to have a, you know, sort of a consensus and understanding of what direction do we want to move, what is the right choice for the community. And sometimes the decision might take several days to make, but then by the time they made it, the whole community was behind the decision so it could move forward.
So this was a chief-based country then? So you had different chieftaincies throughout the country?
Yes. During the time I was there, they were changing from a chief-based system to, as they called it, they said, you know, that America was sending in the democracy. And they actually were really struggling with what that meant. And sometimes I would go to these meetings and, you know, the important leaders of surrounding communities would be there talking about what is democracy. And sometimes the answer would be something like, well, it means we each have a symbol, some kind of animal, and we each have, you know, a belief, and we follow the symbol and the animal. And it was very humorous to hear their interpretations of democracy, because actually there was great truth in what they were saying, but it's certainly not the way that we probably would have described it.
Yeah. Was the chieftaincy was an inherited position?
It was usually,
so it followed bloodlines?
It was, yeah, it was definitely usually through bloodlines, but that was again changing. In fact, right before I had entered the country, it had gone from they had had a coup, so there had been a military takeover of the government, and then they were trying to shift into this democracy. So there was a lot of change that was going on, and in fact, it seemed to be that the choices and the decisions that were being made as the democracy was coming in were not as community-based, and sometimes really not as helpful for the people in the community.
The way the system was, so the chieftaincy was the top level of, say, an inherited power, and everything above that was maybe different than that. It wasn't, where I was at, they had a king, and the king was also, the king's father was the king, and his father was the king, his father was the king. So, I mean, did that exist in Niger?
They had sort of, they would have like a local, they called it chef, that's a sort of a French word. They'd say the local chef, and then the chef of the arrondissement, which is like the larger area. So like as you went progressively to larger areas, there was a larger chiefdom. But this was starting to get a little bit complicated because the political system was trying to mesh with a French and a French system, and also this movement towards democracy. So sometimes there was a lot of contesting about who should be the next chief, because it shouldn't necessarily follow the traditional bloodline.
Mm-hmm. What did you learn from your experiences in Niger that you bring back and you think that's something that we as Americans really can benefit from the society? What lessons can we learn from them?
I think, Doug, just so much about the gratitude for life and the tremendous wealth and outstanding opportunities that we have in the United States that we take for granted. And I think also the beauty of the simplicity of life that they lived. It's not to romanticize it. There was definite struggle and hardship, but there was also a true sense of just enjoying the moment. They had a term there called thakare, which means to basically hang out and enjoy each other in friendship. And that was what people would do a lot, would just hang out under a tree and enjoy each other. And I think we've lost a sense of that, in the States. And we definitely could learn from the pace of life there.
So, in relationship to entertainment, so I know that people must get together for weddings and family functions like that. But we in America we throw parties just to have a party. I mean, did that happen there? I mean, or were like events such as parties limited to like births and deaths and things like that?
It was mostly meaningful events, like something specific, like a birth or a death or some related event that would bring the community together. But as they were switching to the Western system, they were getting more and more influence from this concept of soiree or party, and so they were bringing in different kinds of music, and with that was also coming alcohol, because it was Muslims. For the most part, there was not a problem with alcohol. But with the increasing Western influence, there was more partying for no specific reason, and also more problems with alcohol.
So, were there big cities in Niger, and then also just then the countryside? I mean, if there was a big city, how big was that the big city in Niger?
Well, the most of the country is very small communities of huts that would be, for example, the Zarma, the group that I worked with, they would live in a community of several different families. But there were some groups, like the Tuaregs, that were nomadic. So they would spend their entire life moving from different place to place, literally just setting up camp in the Sahel or the desert region. And so each of these had different lifestyles. But there were many places like the market when all these lifestyles would sort of converge.
Right, right. Okay. So there wasn't really the city dwellers and the country dwellers. Basically, the country was pretty.
There was
pretty
larger, yeah. There were larger towns,
Yeah.
and there's definitely the capital is a massive city. But outside of that, there's some cities, but really not what we would consider necessarily a city.
Okay.
Right.
Were there, say for nightlife in the in the cities? I mean, were there like bars or nightclubs?
They would have, yeah, very sort of basic like disco kind of club place.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was a lot of that? I mean, if they did drink and stuff, was that homemade or was it imported or?
The only thing that they produced in terms of export in the country was that, in terms of foods or drink products, was beer Niger, a beer that they made there.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Deborah, I think you really shared a whole lot of information with us about Niger and West Africa. It's a place that I don't know. I didn't know anything about, so I certainly feel like know a little bit about Niger as a country now. And I appreciate that. I appreciate for you coming in and sharing your artifacts and your jewelry and stuff with us. I think that's a great thing. So, do you have any last comments you'd want to share with us?
I'd like to give a greeting or a blessing in one of the languages. It's Alahukijam,
Okay.
which means may God bring you health.
All right. All right. Thank you very much. I'd also like to remind our audience that we have a National Peace Corps Day coming up, February 28th. You can log into the Peace Corps site at www.peacecorps.gov to find out more information about that. And if you are a teacher or somebody in a position of education, you'd like to have your Peace Corps volunteer come and talk to your group, you can find out more information about that on that site. Well, that's our program for today. I hope you've enjoyed being with us, and more importantly, that you feel a little closer and more knowledgeable about the peoples of Niger. Please join us next time when we visit another country and bring the world home. Aloha.